I rarely hit 10,000 steps. I lost 4.5 stone anyway. Which if you spent any time being told that's the target, the daily goal, the baseline, the thing you're supposed to hit before you can claim you've done anything, that probably sounds a bit backwards. I thought so too, until I looked at the data. I've been tracking every day since Boxing Day 2023. 13 years of NHS blood tests behind that. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you what the movement data actually looked like across 13 months and why the number that changed things wasn't the one I'd been chasing. 3 things. First, what I'd actually observed about movement during my extended fast, not gym data, not training programs, just what happened naturally when fasting changed the conditions underneath. Second, the reframe that changed how I thought about movement entirely, because the 4,000 steps a day argument isn't really about steps, it's about what movement does to insulin sensitivity when the fasting work has already changed your fuel system. Third, the moment that made me realise I'd been measuring the wrong thing for years. It happened on day 3 of a 5-day fast. I was walking in the rain, not because I'd set a target, but because my body was asking for it. So let me give you the honest picture of my movement history, and it's not a proud one. For years, long before Boxing Day 23, long before any of this, movement was the thing I kept meaning to sort every week. Same story. Life got in the way. Work, the business, kids, evenings. I'd tell myself this week would be different, and then it wasn't. I'd do a few days of decent steps, fall off, beat myself up about it, and start the guilt cycle again. Boxing Day 23, my starting weight, 18 stone. My average daily step count at that point, 2,000. I know because I tracked it. Not deliberately at first, just the phone pedometer running in the background, quietly logging how little I was moving. 2,000 steps. For context, let's get into the kitchen and back a few times. Maybe a slow loop round the car park at the supermarket. That was it. The cultural benchmark is 10,000, has been for decades. I'd heard it so many times, it had basically become background noise. The number that meant you were doing something, the number that defined whether today counted. And for years, I couldn't hit it consistently, which created a pattern I know a lot of people will recognise. The day you do 4,000 steps, you feel like you failed, even if you've also changed what you ate, slept better than usual, and generally done everything else right. 4,000 steps didn't do enough. That was the story that I was telling myself. So here's the puzzle. I averaged 4,295 steps a day across 2025. That was my full year average, tracked across 12 months of exercise logs. Never consistently hit 10,000, some days 8, some days 5. Plenty of days closer to 3. And by October 2025, I'd lost 4.5 stone. Off all 6 medications, my resting heart rate was 58 beats per minute. If the step count was the measure of whether movement was working, it clearly wasn't working by that measure. So either the step count metric was wrong or something else was doing the heavy lifting. Turns out it was both. Boxing Day 2023, starting steps, roughly 2,000 a day. Starting weight, 18 stone. Pre-diabetic, HbA1c of 46. Cholesterol, 8.0. 6 medications, that's the baseline. December 23 through to early 24, I changed to fasting and food quality. That was deliberate. The system says sort your sleep, then sort your food and fasting, then add movement. Movement comes after the foundation is in. So I did that, extended fast, proper food, cut the UPFs, the weight started moving, the blood test started improving, and the steps were still low, still averaging somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 most days. March 24, first blood test. GP looked at the results. Whatever you've been doing, he said. Cholesterol had come down. HbA1c was moving back towards normal. He was genuinely surprised. Hadn't been hitting 10,000 steps. I'd barely been hitting 5,000 on a good day. But here's what I noticed, and this took a while to see. The steps I was doing were different steps. Before 23, 2,000 steps means slow, reluctant movement, getting from the sofa to the car, navigating a car park. The movement of someone whose body was running on glucose, whose insulin was elevated most of the day, whose fuel system was essentially locked in fed state. By mid-2024, 4,000 steps meant fasted morning walks, movement while in a fat-burning state. The engine warm, insulin low, the body actually using the movement to pull glucose from the bloodstream rather than just burning through stored glycogen and stopping. Same number, completely different metabolic context. Then June 25, 21-day fast. June 25th, towards the end of that fast, I kept walking throughout. Some days 5,000 steps, some days 8,000. No weakness, no dizziness. Nothing like what the don't exercise during a fast crowd would have predicted. Body was running on what the data showed was over 180,000 calories of stored energy. Was fully stocked and movement was drawing from it cleanly. Not marathons, not gym sessions, just walks. Daily, but consistent and not forced. And something I noticed on day 3 of a separate 5-day fast that September, 24th of September, GKI was below 1, ketones at 3.9. Properly in a deep fasted state, and it was day 3. I hadn't set a step target that day, I wasn't thinking about the number, and mid-afternoon I just wanted to move. Not to burn calories, not to hit a target, just the body was asking for it. I went out and did a ruck, 25 kilogram rucksack on my back, not because I planned it, but because it felt right. I'd been training with 25 kilogram rucks while I'd been fasted, and I'd done multiple sessions across the year. But heavy exercise in an extended fasting state, and the muscle data said it was preserved. The resting heart rate said 58. That was when it landed for me. I'll be straight with you, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, and I've never been on a morning TV sofa. I'm a 53-year-old Yorkshireman who got fed up and fixed it with data. If that sounds like your kind of content, subscribe. New videos every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. So what was actually happening? Here's what I'd been missing for years. The 10,000 step target was designed as a proxy for movement volume. And volume does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's a proxy that strips away all the context that actually determines what the movement is doing metabolically. When insulin is elevated, when you're eating frequently, running on glucose, in fed state most of the day, movement does something. It burns through glycogen. It creates some demand, but the fat stores are largely locked. Insulin's job is to keep fat in storage. It's the pub landlord at closing time. Until last orders is called, no one's leaving. You can walk 10,000 steps with insulin elevated and the fat burning is minimal. The steps happened, the metabolic work less so. When fasting changes the baseline, when insulin drops, when you're running on ketones, when the fuel system has switched, movement does something completely different. The muscles start pulling glucose from the bloodstream independently of insulin. That's not a small thing. There's a researcher called Javier Gonzalez, human physiologist at Bath. He explained this clearly. The exercise itself means the muscle is taking up more sugar out of the bloodstream independent of insulin. But then a second component, the muscle sensitivity to insulin is heightened over the next day to 2 days. 2 effects, immediate glucose clearance and insulin not required. Then 24 to 48 hours of elevated insulin sensitivity afterwards. When you've already lowered your baseline insulin through fasting and then you add movement, that clears glucose independently of insulin and heightens insulin sensitivity for the next 2 days. You're compounding. Every walk is doing more work than the step count suggests. Think of it like compound interest. Your daily steps done consistently in the right metabolic conditions are 10 quid dropped into a savings account every morning. Doesn't feel like much on any given Tuesday, but 4,000 steps a day for 400 days, done while fasted, done while insulin sensitive, done while your fuel system is actually working. That's 146 grand you hadn't noticed accumulating. I'd been trying to make a big withdrawal, 10,000 steps from an account that was nearly empty. Once the account was full, the modest deposit started compounding properly. Now, I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying 10,000 steps is wrong. I think 6,000 is probably a better minimum target than 4,000. That's where I aim now. What I'm saying is that chasing the number while ignoring the metabolic conditions underneath is like polishing the outside of a car with a knackered engine and wondering why it won't move. The movement is the multiplier, but you need something to multiply. Fix the fasting and the food quality first. Then the movement, even modest, realistic, life gets in the way movement, starts to compound. If I was starting this again, I'd stop tracking steps as the primary metric from day one. Steps are fine as a secondary check. They tell you something about general activity. But the primary metric in the early months should be, am I fasting properly? Is my eating window clean? Those two things change the metabolic conditions that determine what movement actually does when you do it. I spent years feeling like a failure at movement because I couldn't hit 10,000 steps every day. Turns out I was measuring the output of a system that wasn't set up to work yet. Fix the system first and the movement follows. If you're already tracking, already on medication, already frustrated that you're walking and nothing is moving, look at the context, not the count. Are you walking fasted? Are you walking after a longer overnight window? Are you walking when insulin is low? Or are you walking 2 hours after lunch? Same steps, different metabolic state, different effect. If I were looking at my own data and the movement wasn't shifting anything, I'd ask my GP, given where my insulin sensitivity is, what's the movement actually doing? That's a conversation that's worth having. If you're at the stage where you're moving, trying to move, intending to move, sometimes managing it, but it doesn't seem to be doing much, and you haven't looked at the fasting picture yet, this might be why. The body's metabolic conditions determine what movement can do. Not just willpower, not just effort, the underlying fuel system. I was 2,000 steps a day at 18 stone with pre-diabetic blood sugar. The problem wasn't that I wasn't moving enough. The problem was the condition that made movement feel hard and produced poor results from it. Once those conditions changed, the movement got easier, more natural, and started actually working. If movement feels like a punishment you keep failing at, it might not be a willpower issue. It might be a conditions issue. That's worth knowing. If you want to start tracking your own step data alongside your fasting windows to see what your movement is actually doing in different metabolic conditions, I've got a simple tracker template that does exactly that. The link's in the description. You don't need a fancy app. A spreadsheet and a phone pedometer is enough to start seeing the patterns. This is educational content only. It's not medical advice. Speak to your GP before changing your fasting pattern, diet or medication. Next Monday, different pattern, same detective process.